everybody who has a healthy nervous system will react quite robustly to is if you start increasing the amount of carbon dioxide that they're breathing and reduce the amount of oxygen that they're taking in. That's terrifying. They're great experiments of having people breathe carbon dioxide directly, and you basically panic. It's terrifying. One big gulp of carbon dioxide will make you very afraid. It turns out that there are a little group of neurons, of course neurons are just nerve cells, that little group of neurons in the brainstem that respond to levels of carbon dioxide in the blood. Turns out the reason we breathe is, of course, to bring in oxygen and then offload carbon dioxide. But we don't have neurons that stimulate breathing for oxygen. We have neurons that sense when carbon dioxide levels get too high. So if you hold your breath, eventually carbon dioxide levels go up. And then at the moment that they reach a certain threshold, these neurons fire and trigger the gasp reflex. So in that moment, you bring in oxygen, and then of course, you offload some carbon dioxide. Yeah, so free divers, a sport I actually don't recommend because there's only one way out of that sport, as they say. I have some friends who are free divers, and obviously you can do it safely with the right guide and training, et cetera. But it is a very dangerous sport because for most people, when carbon dioxide levels increase in the bloodstream and brain, it triggers this gasp reflex. What free divers train is carbon dioxide tolerance. So they do that a couple of different ways. And again, please don't do this because people have died doing this. So one way is you can do what's called cyclic hyperventilation. Right, you do that 25 times or so, and you think, oh, you're bringing in a lot of oxygen. You are, but you're also offloading a lot of carbon dioxide, especially if you use forceful exhales. Normally humans breathe through active inhales and passive exhales. They just sort of dump their air passively. But if you do cyclic hyperventilation, you're dumping a lot of carbon dioxide. And then if you were to hold your breath, what you would find is you could hold your breath for a lot longer. Why? Because your carbon dioxide levels are reduced, so you don't have the same impulse to breathe. Now on land, that's a more or less safe thing to do, provided that you can get a good gulp of air once the gasp reflex hits. If you do that before going underwater, cyclic hyperventilation, they call it air packing, and then you go underwater, but your carbon dioxide is then lower, you're going to be able to stay under longer. But this is very dangerous because normally when that carbon dioxide threshold hits, you would pop up to the surface, you sort of panic and want to go to the top. Free divers learn to tolerate high levels of carbon dioxide in their bloodstream and stay very, very calm. The way they die is very interesting because it speaks to the physiology. The way they die is they'll just be swimming, feeling completely calm because they're very used to, they've trained up this CO2 tolerance, carbon dioxide tolerance. And when they die, they don't suddenly feel like, oh my goodness, I'm running out of air. It's just lights go black. That's it, they're just blackout. And so they're alive and then they're gone. And so this is why they use spotters, they have a line, etc. Anytime you hear about somebody dying doing free diving, it's rarely because they weren't comfortable at a given depth. When you hear that skilled parachuters die. Why? Well, because they're so comfortable with so many jumps, they actually forget to pull. There are many instances in which they're videoing the first time jumpers, right? And they're getting the video for them and they themselves forget to pull because they're so comfortable jumping out of planes. And so as people get more and more advanced in something, there's a new risk that surfaces because unless it's very reflexive and they built all the protocols in, oftentimes they can overlook the very thing that allowed them to become expert in the first place. I saw the Free Solo movie with Alex Honnold, and he lives, and it's still scary to watch, right? You actually know the outcome at the beginning. They sort of make it clear that he manages to do this, and it's still terrifying. We are so visual as animals. We are so visual. I mean, rodents, even a lot of carnivore predators are extremely olfactory, smell-driven. Humans are incredibly visual. I mean, more than 40% of the human brain has something to do with vision. Visual navigation, eye movements, visual perception, color perception, face perception. We have dedicated areas of the brain that are just for perceiving human faces and the micro expressions of human faces. So it's so highly evolved for us. When we see depth of field that's not parallel to the ground, it is terrifying with good reason because, what's the universal force that we all experience from the time we're born is gravity. The first thing you learn is that things fall down, not up, right? It's like the fundamental rule that we come into the world with. It's like day one, even though the baby is kind of flopping around like a potato but can't even hold its head up, the eyes are often, the ocular muscles of the eyes are often not very good. So babies, their eyes are rolling back in their head. That generally corrects itself over the next few weeks or so. But the feeling of gravity of them, if they feel like they're being dropped even the tiniest bit, right, they will go wide-eyed. So there's a built-in vestibulo-ocular reflex. So when you see depth of field in the direction of the gravitational pull, you actually get a little bit of activity in your cerebellum, which literally means mini brain, a little area of the brain in the back that actually looks like a little mini brain if you were looking at the brain. And that area of the brain is responsible for all the reflexes associated with the falling reflex. It does a lot of other things too. So when you see that depth of field in the direction of gravity, you have a little microactivity in your brain that you might fall. And if you've ever been to a tall bridge or a dam and you go to the edge, and people love to play with this, where you can walk, and it's terrifying, and you're not going to fall through it, right? Or they tell you you're not going to fall through it, but it's terrifying because your body and brain are preparing for this immense fall. So when you see this in video, it's the same thing. I always say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a video is worth 10 million pictures. I mean, this is the reason why we're so drawn to things like Instagram scrolling. It's like text, video, or the enormous popularity of TikTok. It's video. Now, the enormous popularity of Twitter still escapes me because that's a different sort of cultural gravitational pull. But video, and in particular action that gets us in a kind of a primitive mode, that is an extremely alluring visual image. In terms of the variety of different things that can stimulate fear and the ways that they can do that, that is highly contextual. So the forebrain, this real estate in the brain right behind the forehead, is incredible because it's sort of free real estate for you to customize for your life according to what happens to you early on. So for instance, you might not be at all afraid of heights. And you say, well, why is that so? Well, maybe when you were a kid, you were one of those maniacs that doing, in the States, we call them cherry drops, the kids that could, swing on their feet and then jump off the bar. And then other kids are timidly crawling to the top of the thing, don't even want to go up the ladder to the slide. There's a ton of variation, and that variation does not exist in the kind of deeper circuitry, the final common path circuitry. It exists in the learning that we experienced early in life. One bad fall can do it. I mean, I was bitten very badly by a German Shepherd when I was a kid. Head almost got my eye, but for whatever reason, I've always liked dogs anyway. But there are other things that I've experienced that have left long-term negative imprints. So it's highly contextual, and a lot of it has to do with what happens immediately after the bad experience. This is why nowadays there's a lot of legal use of the drug ketamine after traumas to get them to dissociate from this extreme emotional state.